Now, and here we are. Welcome. Okay, my name is Martin McGovern. I am the lead coach at Career Therapy, and today we're going to be talking about your post-grad pitch. And what that means is, how do you talk about yourself when you get out into the job search? It's kind of there's a lot of different opinions online, and today we're going to be going into a little bit of the psychology behind it, the sales methodology behind it, and just some of the interpersonal communication stuff that goes into all of this. And so before we kick things off, I'd love to get a sense of, who all is here. And if we could just go around, tell me your name and tell me what it is about web development that you enjoy most. That's a big question. But Brian, want to kick us off?
Sure. So my name is Brian. I am the instructor of this class. And what about web development excites me most? I would say it is the problem solving and the logic that goes behind it. So kind of like figuring out step by step, breaking down a problem and kind of finding like step by step how it all works and putting it back together.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like you might have stolen everyone's answer with that one. But we can just open it up from there. What is something either about web development or about the job search in general that's on your mind? We'll just keep it real broad because I know the intros kind of stink. But Jonathan, take us next.
Okay. I'm Jonathan Hicks. What about web development excites me? Well, I think I would agree with Brian. I've been an auto mechanic my whole life. So trying to, problem solve, figure out why something isn't working and then make it work again. That's just kind of something that comes natural to me. And so, web development, I don't know, I get excited thinking about it, but I also get very nervous. There's a lot that's entailed when it comes to that. And in 10 weeks, you can only learn so much, so I don't know. I would say, something that worries me most about like post coding temple, job search and stuff like that is I think that web development is a very broad thing, right? I would imagine that there's probably a lot of different categories that could fit under the guise of web development, right? And I think something that just scares me a little bit is not completely understanding what it is each potential job is, and making sure that I am qualified enough to do that, or at the very least have some idea of what I'm doing. Faking it until you make it only goes so far, until either it works out or somebody finds out you're a fraud, one of the two. And so I just want to make sure that I understand a little more, what it is that I could be getting into, So.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing all that because there's a lot to it. And just kind of one of the fun things that I've noticed as a career coach for the past, too many years, won't date myself, but one thing I've noticed is that once you get out there and you start meeting people that actually work in the field and you start dealing with real professionals, or you get on a team at some point, you start to quickly realize that everyone's kind of Googling it. and so the imposter syndrome's in everyone, and it's something that we all deal with. But I think that only comes from exposure. And so we'll push you to get out and meet more people and talk confidently about what you do know and not overpromise and underdeliver. Just
Right.
promise what you got and deliver what you can. And it's more about being helpful than being the best. And usually it's the most helpful, most easy to connect with people that end up in the roles, not the person who's the smartest. Sometimes the smartest person's an a-hole and no one wants to hire him. So there's a lot to it. We'll get into it. But I appreciate you sharing all that. There's plenty of layers to peel back in that onion. All right, Let's keep going around. Who's next?
I'll go.
Okay.
So, my name is real name. I go by Vic. My real name is Vishal Sheth, and I to answer your question directly about web development. To be honest, I've tried my hand at it, and it does not get me excited. But what does get me excited is data science and data analytics and digging into all this stuff to figure out trends. And one of the reasons it does that is I'm an engineer from my former life, and in between for a few years I owned my own business and stuff. And so I like the challenge, and I like the fact that math never lies. Numbers don't lie, and so numbers can always tell you a story. It could be a good story, bad story, but at least you can use it to your advantage. And then circling back around to web development, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. It's just something that, again, doesn't tickle me fancy, but I do believe it's important, specifically in this day and age of everything being in the cloud, everything being online. And so I also feel, and being an engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. I understand that without a user interface, there is no online, and that's where the web development piece comes into play.
Cool.
But yeah, that's my.
No, I love it. That's a great intro. I appreciate it, man. And I like that, you not only know what doesn't, catch your eye, but you know what does. And we can lean into that, and we can leverage the past to get into the next role. I like how you connected your engineering background to your data focus. And so putting those things together and telling that story is a big piece of what we'll be going over today. So I appreciate you kind of laying that out for us. And so as we continue to move forward, we're going to, try and find that through line in all of our stories, because that really becomes the pitch that we tell, whether it's a short pitch, a long pitch, a written pitch, a spoken pitch, it all kind of comes together. So I appreciate you laying that out for us. All right, who's next?
I can go if you want.
Yeah.
My name is Joe. And what gets me excited about web development, I guess maybe not web development specifically, because we're learning a ton of stuff here, but just like coding in general has been like learning something new, because I'm in my mid 40s and I really haven't learned anything new in a long time, aside from like the basic learning through life kind of thing, right? But with actual studying something and being, devoting my time and energy to learn something new has been a long time coming. So it's been great to do that. And it's been cool to kind of see things figured out, like working on something. Oh, now it's starting to click. Now I got it. And doing something I couldn't do 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. So that's been kind of fun and exciting to kind of get that part of my brain working again. And in terms of, I guess, like with kind of what Jonathan was saying too, like just my hesitation really, because like obviously this is Bootcamp is awesome, but the purpose of a Bootcamp is just like to kind of drink out of a fire hose, right? There's just you get a ton of stuff, and you kind of got to take it all in and keep working on it. So whilst I realize I have learned a lot, I also realize how much I don't know. So kind of with Jonathan, like I kind of have like, I think you mentioned the imposter syndrome, where you're like, one of my fears is like going to an interview and then like talking and then realizing, hey, this guy really doesn't know anything. It's like, yeah, he knows like some of the basic stuff, but like, especially when they're looking for like, 3 to 5 years experience. And I know you can kind of craft your resume to kind of speak to previous work to kind of back this up. But yeah, so I've been pretty much in sales for most of my career, and in like training and development for a little while too. So the reason why I jumped into this boot camp, because I really was kind of like at the point where it's like, I got to learn something new. I need something else in my toolkit to bring out to get a better job, not just be at the same kind of levels of work I've been at for a while, but take that next step up and just everything. And I've always had an interest in coding and like, everything around that. So I figured with this year being kind of crazy and tons of stuff happening, why the heck not? So I just signed up for it. It's like I said, it's just like, I need, my wife and I just had a baby. So I really needed to like kind of amp things up a little bit in terms of my professional life and kind of, raise the bar a bit more. And I talked to Brian a little bit about it. I'm kind of leaning toward like a project manager role, where it's like, I can leverage what I've used and what I've learned here, but also not throw out the window my, decades of experience in like sales and management and training and kind of the more soft people skills kind of thing. So that's kind of where my head's at now. So it's been awesome. learning all this stuff. It's been, frustrating just realizing when I can't get it as quickly as I'd like to get it. And Brian can attest, I asked the same questions over and over again, and finally starts to get it clicking. So yeah, so it's awesome. And this is, I think now we're kind of wrapping this course up. So meeting with you and kind of getting some ideas. So I'm already working on my resume and cover letter right now. So hearing what you have to say is going to be huge, just to kind of help me tweak it and just, look at it with fresh eyes and just give me that confidence I need to really kind of move forward and get the best that I can.
I love it. Yeah, we're definitely going to touch on how this plays into the resume as well. So we'll be coming around to that. And congratulations on the new baby. That's awesome.
He's a gem.
Who haven't we gotten to yet?
It's me.
All right, jump
Shaka.
in.
Yeah, so I'm Shaka Barnes, and I'm sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather, but
me too.
Shaka Barnes, and what I love about this program, well, coding in general, is the ability to train your mind to become agile and to reinvent yourself and become fresh, and learning all of these different techniques and methods of doing coding. Something that scares me the most is tricking myself into thinking that I can't do it. So the imposter syndrome is something that has been weighing heavily, especially since we're coming to the end of our program and now we're going to lose Brian. Well, not actually lose Brian, but can't see him every day and ask him different questions. Is kind of making me a little bit fearful. And I'm thinking my classmates as well. So that's pretty much where I'm at with everything. So that's it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. And a lot of it is the stories we tell ourselves, right? And so, if we're telling ourselves a negative story, it's going to be really hard to convince someone else, right? And we'll touch on some of those things that happen when we graduate a boot camp, the mindsets that we're in, and how to combat them or how to reframe them. Did we miss anyone? Did we get everyone? I think we got everyone, right? Cool.
Yes.
All right. Well, now I got to tell you who the hell I am, right? Put myself on the spot. So let me share my screen here. Pull up the presentation for today. There we go. All right. Everyone can see my screen here?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So today we're doing a talk called The Perfect Postgrad Pitch. And my name is Martin McGovern. I started my career out in the marketing and advertising space. And I spent a lot of years with a love of behavioral sciences and trying to really understand, what makes people do what they do. Why do we buy the cars we do? Why do we do all these different things, that seem counterintuitive, but we're all engaged in it, right? And so I spent so many years trying to help companies figure out how to leverage behavioral psychology to get us to take action. I worked in credit card industry and all sorts of other places that are very good at getting us to do things, right? And over the years, that interest in behavioral psychology sort of shifted. And I started helping people build personal brands with this marketing experience and kind of saw those personal brands help people get new jobs, and then got involved in education and eventually got wrapped up in career coaching down the line. And so now I basically take all those same skills that I learned in the marketing and advertising world, and I reverse engineer them. So rather than helping companies get your money and, sell you more junk or Coca-Cola or whatever the hell else, they want to put in your mind, body, or wallet, I try and reverse it and help you get money back from companies. So how do we take all the same strategies that companies use to get our attention and get our money and reverse engineer it to get their attention and get their money into our pockets? So that's what we'll be talking a little bit about today, how to use these techniques that companies are so, so good at. How do we learn those skills ourselves and use them to our advantage? So my organization is called Career Therapy. And, as you can see here, it is about that sort of emotional side. I think a lot of you touched on the imposter syndrome, that emotional side of things, and how we actually think about ourselves, what stories we tell ourselves, what stories we tell other people. And that's the promotional part. So part of it is, how do we speak to ourselves on a daily basis to convince ourselves that we can do it? And then how do we actually sell that to other people? And they're slightly different stories. So as we talk about the perfect post-grad pitch, there's actually two stories we're telling here today. One that we tell ourselves to hype ourselves up, and one that we tell other people. And we don't want to confuse the two, because too often we tell the personal story to the other company, right? Or to the company that we're talking to. And then they go, well, why would I care about what you want? I'm in it for me, right? And so we'll be talking about that dichotomy as well. So today's presentation is going to be broken out into 3 sections: your words, your stories, and your pitch. And I'd like this to be as conversational as we can make it. I've got you all pulled up on the side of my screen, so interrupt me at any time, ask questions at any time. I'm going to pull up the chat here as well. If you're feeling more comfortable just tossing your questions into the chat bar. And, you know, there will be a few different things that we touch on in here that are some exercises for you to work on as well. So you can leave here today with an actual written pitch that you can then adapt for your resume, or adapt for a networking meeting, or adapt for an interview moving forward. All right. Any questions about pitching yourself before we jump into things? What's our comfort level on a scale from 1 to 5, of 5 being I feel confident as hell pitching myself, and 1 being I feel, you know, like I never want to talk to another human being? Put it in the chat. Ooh, 3s. Okay. 3.5.
Wait, was it 1 was the highest, or what one?
1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest.
Okay. I mean, but so in terms of confidence in speaking, pitching?
In pitching yourself, yeah. Maybe a 2. Got it. All right. Well, that means that I can at least get you up to a 4 or a 3, depending on where you're at. So I love it. All right. Well, it always starts with the words that we use, right? So who are we actually talking to at the end of the day? And, you know, each of these slides is going to be in a question format. So really, I'm curious, who are we talking to when we actually go out into the job search? Who do you think you're going to encounter at these companies?
Hiring managers.
Hiring managers. Who else?
Yeah, HR, hiring managers. You might even talk, I mean, some of us might even talk directly to the future boss, possibly.
Yeah, directly to the future boss, sometimes the CEO. Who else?
I mean,
you might talk to other members on the team that you're going to be hired on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, you know, a team lead or something like that. Like, you never know who you're going to talk to. You know, my philosophy has always been, if you're walking into a job interview, you're walking in and you just assume that anyone that works there will automatically make an opinion of you. And you need to make sure that that opinion is positive, right? Because a hiring manager, if he noticed that you know, had spoke to one of the employees, he may go to that employee and be like, hey, what did you think about this guy when you talked to him? You know, because I want to make sure I'm going to hire somebody that gets along with everyone else here.
Totally.
And so that's always my philosophy, you know, it's like, just try and make sure that you put your best foot forward, and just assume that everybody is going to talk to you, you know, and make sure that I don't know, that people are okay with you, I guess. I'm not very good with words.
No, you're good, man. You're good. And I think that's really on point, because it plays into networking and why networking is so important. Networking and informational interviews are not technically interviews, right? But every single conversation we have with anyone in a professional capacity may turn into a business opportunity down the road. So you never know who's going to give you that insight or that connection or that potential, you know, seed that turns into a job down at some point. So, you know, I'm even talking to you all today because of someone I probably met 3 years ago, and they made an introduction or brought me to an event or did something that led me down a path to meeting all of you today. And who knows 10 years from now where we might cross paths again. And one of my favorite things about approaching networking and the job search in a much more, in a way where you look at it much more as a practice, like a daily practice, is that, you know, you don't really stop once you have a job. These are just, we're not trying to make you go through this almost like ninja warrior thing to get to the end prize, right? What we're trying to do is teach you just some basic communication, networking, and career skills that will help you in your next job, that will help you in your next 3 job transitions, rather than, getting it done for this one and then 5 years from now, 10 years from now, having to start from scratch again. If we stop building our network once we get a job, all we're going to do is put ourselves at a disadvantage in 7 years when we have to go do it again. So what I'm trying to do is not like make you become the world's best networker or the world's best pitcher or any of that stuff. What we're trying to do is just get slightly better at all these skills, because over time, the more we talk to people, the more we learn about these things, the more we put them into practice, the easier it is to get a promotion, get that next job, move companies, get a bigger pay raise. All this stuff just kind of becomes easier and easier over time. And just to give you some background, I have an anxiety disorder. So back when I was younger, doing anything career related was basically like going to just give me crazy panic attacks. And so my very first informational interview, I choked so hard that when he asked, "Tell me about yourself," I literally couldn't remember my pitch. And the entire reason that I met with this guy was because I took a job search seminar and gave a great pitch. And they were like, "You have a great pitch. You should go meet this guy who runs an advertising agency." And I was like, "Cool." And I met with him and I read everything on his website. I learned everything about his business, but I forgot to figure out who the hell I was and repeat my pitch and practice my pitch. So when he asked me, I just literally was like, "I'm Martin, I go to DePaul," and I choked. And I'm like, "I'm Martin, I go to DePaul," and I choked. And like that frog, if you've ever had that. And eventually he's just like, "Look, I got work to do." And it was like 10 minutes. I'm in a full suit. I'm standing in the snow in Chicago, feeling like I got hit by a bus. And I'm like, what just happened? But what I learned from that situation is, number one, I got to get better at these things. Number two, 6 years later, I wrote him an email and was like, "Hey, thanks for the learning experience. I had my worst informational interview with you. You probably have no idea who I am, but I learned a lot." And he wrote back saying, "You're right. I have no idea who you are. Don't remember that ever happening, but you seem to have improved because I opened your email. Let's get coffee." And we ended up having like a 3-hour chat, and it was really great. So a lot of times when we're out there practicing this stuff, we're going to mess up, and that's fine, because the goal isn't to ace it every time. The goal is to get slightly better at it over a long period of time. And honestly, the learning curve is quick. So as soon as you start getting out and telling your story to people, you're going to get really good really fast. You just got to get a few reps under your belt. And the more people you talk to, the less scary this all becomes, because you start getting real data points, real conversations. It's not just the imaginary fears in our head. And that's really what the imposter syndrome is. Imposter syndrome is ideas that haven't been challenged by reality yet. Once you're actually in the role, I've yet to have someone who I've coached come back to me and say, "You know what, my imposter syndrome was true and I shouldn't be in this industry. I quit." I've never had that happen. All I've had happen is this: "Hey, I'm working in this job and it's going really well. Now I want to go get more money. Can you help me do that?" It's always, I want to go get more. I want to get more money, more responsibility. So the imposter syndrome is just there to mess with us during the job search process. And then once we're in the role, we realize that everyone's kind of dealing with it, and we can build from there. So yes, we're talking to a lot of different people. We're talking to recruiters, hiring managers. We're talking to all sorts of different folks, and we always have to be talking from their perspective. So when that person asks me, "Tell me about yourself," there's a bunch of different answers there, right? There's the first answer, the surface answer, which is literally, "Tell me about yourself." "Oh, I go to this school. I grew up in this place. I do this work." It's very surface, right? And then there's the deeper question, the second question. I think every interview question has a second question. And the deeper question is, can you start this conversation? Can you set the tone? Or really, "I don't know how to kick this off. Would you mind doing it?" So we can hear these things and we can say, how do I help this person? I'm talking to a hiring manager right now. What information can I give them that will make it easier for them to move me forward in this process? Rather than trying to be perfect or trying to impress them, it's all about just helping. And if we can take on the perspective of being the most helpful job seeker, we can get a lot more traction. And so this is that big shift from me first to them first. And this is really, at the end of the day, the biggest shift that I want to make in your mindset. So if there's nothing else you remember today, remember that it's all about them first, then us. So when I asked you all, what is it that you enjoy about development? You gave me, I love solving problems. I love getting into the weeds, research, technical stuff, all this. I love the sales process, or I love dealing with people. All of that is great, but it only matters when it's in service to the company's goal. So a lot of times, and I would say probably 80, 90% of the time, when I say when I ask someone, what are your strengths? They say, I love to solve problems. Anyone else feel that way? I feel like we had that on this call, right? So I love to solve problems. Okay, go walk my dog. That's a problem that needs solving. Is that the one you want to solve? No. Okay, so we're not being specific enough, right? I love to solve what kinds of problems? We have a bunch of people on this call. Which problems are your favorite to solve, right? Do you like the research problem, the data problem, the people problem, the design problem? And Vic, you did a really good job. You said, I love the data analysis problem, right? So like being very specific on what aspect you enjoy most, but then tying it to the business need. Why is your interest in data analysis important to the company's bottom line? And that's really what we forget to address when we're pitching ourselves. So often when people pitch themselves, they say, I, me, my, me. It just kind of drags on forever. Like if you read any cover letter, it's brutal. It's like, I, me, every sentence. I've literally read cover letters where every single sentence starts with I or me. And you actually break it down and you look at it and you go, why would anyone read this thing, right? No one wants to read it. So we want to flip that around. We want to be them first, then us. Your company's doing some really cool stuff. Here's how my skill set will help you do that more, right? Your company's trying to solve, I don't know, what's a good company? Your company's trying to solve getting healthier food into people's body. Okay. Well, the way that you're doing that is through Farmer Fridge. Does everyone know Farmer Fridge? It's like these vending machines with healthy food in them. So your company's doing Farmer Fridge. Well, I can help build code that makes that even more efficient, that makes the experience even better, that makes the app that they use even cleaner, all that kind of stuff, right? So we always want to be them first. I love this part of coding, and that's relevant to you because it will help your business do these things. I'm going to pause there because I know this is one of those tricky ones because so much of the internet is being like, build your brand, make it about you, know your values, learn what culture you should be a part of and all that stuff. So are there any questions around like where that sort of balance is? Because it's obviously not all just them, right? There has to be a balance, but any questions or thoughts around what we've talked about up to this point?
That makes sense. It's kind of like when you go on a date, right? You want to talk about them. You want to ask them questions and not just talk about yourself the whole time because that's a turnoff. So I'm sure it's the same way.
100%. 100%. I love the dating analogies. Another one is you wouldn't ask to get married on a first date, right? You don't go on the first date and the first thing that comes out of your mouth is, would you marry me? Right? They're going to be like, no, thanks. That's not quite how we do it here in America. So when we go on a networking meeting and the first thing we say is, so do you have any open roles for developers? They go, I don't know who you are. No, I don't know. That sounds like a lot of responsibility you're putting on my shoulders. Please don't do that. Maybe after a couple of cups of coffee, we can talk about that, And so a lot of this is, it's funny how these norms exist in other areas. And then when we get in the job search, it all seems so weird, right? It almost seems inauthentic to not just be blunt about the fact that we want a job. But the truth of the matter is that if we're networking in a professional setting, it's already known that you want a job. Just like if you're dating, it's already known that you probably want something more than just coffee, right? And I won't go into too much on that. But we don't want to be too blunt about it. We don't want to say it right off the bat, right? It scares people away. So we need to build trust. We need to build rapport. And if we don't set that baseline level of trust and rapport, then we have a much harder time getting to, hey, how do we collaborate? How do we work together? What could I help with in a contract position or in a full-time position or whatever way we might be able to help? And the kicker, because we're taking a them first approach, our goal isn't to get the job even. Our goal is to help them fill this position with the best possible person. And usually that's us when we're in the job search, right? But there have been tons of roles that I've interviewed for where the pay's not right, or the position is too data driven and I'm not a data guy, or it's there's something about it, bandwidth isn't there, whatever. And most people, walk away kicking a rock down the path, right? But what I always do is I follow up with them and say, hey, I'm sorry this didn't work out. I have a few people that I think would be great for that role. Would you like an introduction? And that way I'm always the most helpful candidate. And they remember that, and that might come back around. Maybe you get your friend in there, and then a year from now, you end up getting a huge pay raise because they bring you into that company, right? So these are the ways that we start building long-term career success rather than just, trying to get stuff from people all the time. So how are you currently expressing yourself? What are you currently saying to people when they ask, tell me about yourself? I could put you on the spot and we can go around. No, make everyone freak out real quick. But like, just, generally break down what your typical answer would be.
Well, no, I say I'm a dad because I got a little 4 months. So I'm proud to say I'm a father finally. But yeah, so I'm a musician. Dad, I just like to drink beer. I like to, just better myself in a variety of ways. So yeah.
That's your interview answer?
Oh, interview.
Sorry.
I say just people in general.
I'm a dad, I like beer. Actually, I like that answer. It's solid. It really gives a well-rounded view. But let's say we're in a networking context or we're in an interview and someone says, well, tell me about yourself. Like, what would be the typical response?
I'd say, I've spent the last couple of decades in, a variety of international, national sales environments. I've had the opportunity to lead learning and development programs at a couple of different companies. And I really get excited about, working with people, developing people, but also being a bridge, whether it be internally, externally, with a variety of people groups. And especially now, have the opportunity to learn a whole brand new skill. I'm really excited to see how I can tie that together with what my love, my passion is in the previous business world I was in.
Awesome. You have a lot of great elements in there. In today's conversation, I'm hoping to bring them together in a little bit more of like a punch at the end where you can say, and I'm looking to work with tech teams in a project management role or something like that. Because I think you had mentioned that earlier. But yeah, you actually really laid out a lot of your history in a really solid way. So bravo on that. Anyone else want to lay out theirs?
I guess oh, sorry, CB, you haven't had a chance to talk yet. You can go ahead.
I kind of don't really like to lean in on my work history because I don't like to put myself in a box because I'm always trying to learn something new.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to lean in on a lot of different characteristics, like seeing myself as a visionary, a person that has a lot of grit, who's hardworking, a team player, communicate well, can collaborate with the CEO down to the admin assistant, someone who's hardworking and determined, things of that nature to kind of give them a little bit insight into who I am and how I can adapt.
Nice. I really like that. And then there's the question of when do you say those or what stories do you use to back it up? So we'll definitely get into some of the storytelling as well, because you have a lot of good buzzwords in there, and I want to make sure that we can back them up with stories. One thing I was talking about earlier today is, if I tell you I'm a nice guy, immediately a red flag goes up going, why is this guy having to tell me that? like if I say I'm empathetic versus telling a story about empathy, the story tends to get more traction and more legs. If I say I'm a great collaborator and then don't give an example, people tend to question. So we always want to be able to back up those things. So I love it. Anyone else just want to, let's say we were in an interview and I said, tell me about yourself. What would you say?
It's a hard question, at least for me. The hard part about my background is that, you know, I've come from a family business. You know, the repair shop I work for, my dad owns. You know, I've only had a couple of jobs that outside of that, but those are all jobs that I got through networking. Usually, you know, I have a friend that worked there and they were looking for somebody else, you know, but I guess one of my biggest strengths is that I get along well with people. I know how to relate well with others. Rarely have I ever tried to force myself onto someone. You know, I have an ability to just create a connection with someone. Aside from that, you know, everything that I don't even know how to put it. You know, I go for things that I want. I've always been the person that, you know, my bosses have come to. They're like, hey, I have this issue. I know it's not part of like your job description, but I need it taken care of, because they know that I'm that person that will go and do it. Nice. Something that my mother instilled in me as a kid is you have to, anywhere that you work, you need to create a niche that only you can fill. And that is the best way to be the best employee, you know, for someone that you're working for, is creating a niche that only you can fill. And so that's what I have done. I have never had a job where I've never been fired. There are jobs that usually something has come up and I've had to leave, but there are always jobs that I have been told, you know, we really hate to lose you. You're a big part of our team here, and it sucks that you have to go. You know, that's not necessarily a pitch I would throw into an interview, because I have very little experience with interviews. I think I've been interviewed one time, you know, and it was just a very like, hey, this is the job description. Can you handle that? You know, and it's like, oh yeah, I can do that. But I've never actually been in an actual interview where it's like, hey, why should we hire you? You know, what makes you better than everybody else?
Sure, absolutely. And I just want to, you said better than everyone else. I think that's one of the things that causes so much imposter syndrome. It's not necessarily about being better than everyone else. It's about just being able to articulate what's different. So I don't think I'm the best career coach. I'm definitely, depending on how you want to break it down, you know, there's career coaches that make more money. There's career coaches that make less money. There's career coaches that have more of an audience. There's career coaches that have less of an audience. Like, there's so many ways to measure it. But I will say that there's a certain approach I take that other people maybe come close to, but they're not quite the same. And so the nice thing about what you said there was figuring out your niche. That's really what we're trying to get into here. And there's sort of a push and pull here, because we want to be specific enough that a company can understand that we have a point of view, because not having a point of view is really, it leaves too much up to ambiguity. So we need some sort of point of view, but we don't want to have such a deep point of view that we can't mold into the different roles that we're applying for, right? So it is a bit of a tightrope walk. And that's something that we're going to talk about today, about how to focus again on the company's problems and how we help them with their problems over our own, you know, goals and interests. So here's what we're typically seeing people say when they sit down in an interview. And I'm actually quite proud of you all for not saying this in your initial pitch here. It's a good thing that you're not starting with this. And what we want to do is really refine what the good pieces of what you did throw out there. So, oh, it looks like Nicole took off. Goodbye, Nicole. So typically what people say is, you know, tell me about yourself. We're sitting in an interview and they'll say, hi, I recently graduated from Coding Temple and I'm really excited for an opportunity to learn in this role. Does this resonate with any of you? Have any of you said this or said something close to this? No? Head shaking, yes? All right. Brian says yes.
No, my whole my whole idea is that, you know, somebody looking to hire isn't looking to hire somebody that is like, if I'm talking to you and I'm like, hey man, I'm excited to learn this industry, you know, you probably are going to think like, I don't want to hire somebody I have to teach. I want to hire somebody that is willing to jump in and figure things out, but I don't want to have to spend the time to teach this guy, because that's time and money lost, you know, trying to teach this guy how to do something that he's interviewing for already.
You're thinking like an employer. I love it. Because
Well,
here's what they're hearing. They're hearing, hi, I'm inexperienced, unemployed, and need you to teach me. So whenever we say, I recently graduated and I'm excited for the opportunity to learn in this role, they're hearing, I'm inexperienced, unemployed, need you to teach me. Now, you all sent me through a loop, because normally the first thing everyone says is I recently graduated. So now I got to redo my whole presentation. No, just kidding. But I love where you're coming from, because you've already got a basic sense of this. And that means that the them first thinking is already there, and we can start to build on it. So that's awesome. So what do they want to hear? Let's get into that, because that's really the big question here, right? We've given a shot. Everyone's gone around and given a shot of like what your pitch might be or how you might introduce yourself. But what do you think, if you were to just be on the other side, put yourself in the shoes of the employer for a second, what is it that they want to hear from you? So you're sitting there, you're being told to interview this person. You've got a role to fill on the team. What do you want to hear from them?
First, they have the skills that I'm looking to fill.
So the skills, what else?
I think somebody that actually has like a passion for what they're going to do. You know, if I were to hire somebody where I work now at the mechanic shop, if a guy shows up, he's like, hey, I just need, you know, an extra $100 a week, you know, I'll do whatever you need me to do. Chances are I'm not going to hire that guy, because one, I don't think he's going to show up to work to actually work. And I don't want to work next to a guy that hates being here for, you know, 8 hours, 9, 10, 12 hours a day. Like, you know, I want to hire somebody that's passionate and actually wants to do what it is I'm asking them to do, not somebody that's just showing up for a paycheck.
You're right on point. And I think passion is an interesting word. So I come from the marketing world, and we every buzzword has been used to death. And so passion is one of those in the career space that I think almost even turns people off at this point. Or maybe it's just me, who knows? But I would just say like curiosity. If you're curious about it, you should at least have a baseline curiosity. And all of you have expressed to me, that was the first question I asked you. Why are you enjoying what you do? Like what are you most curious about when it comes to the work you do? And so for me, it's literally human psychology. I'll probably be a therapist in 15 years. But like right now, like back when I was in marketing, it was, how did this company get me to buy that thing I didn't need? That was the big question that I had. Like, how did they get me to sit in front of the TV when I was a 12-year-old with my brother waiting for commercials to fill out our Christmas list? Like, we would watch shows we didn't want to watch in order to look at commercials to fill out our Christmas list. Like, that's how good companies are at manipulating people. And God forbid if we had an iPad back then. But my big question was, how did they manipulate me? How did they do that? And now it's, how do we manipulate them? And then in the future, it's going to be, how do we manipulate ourselves? Like that's what I love to do. And so those curiosities will drive me in all these different career moves, right? So for you, it's like, you know, what is it about development? What is it about creating a website? What is it about helping a company build an app or a feature or whatever the thing might be? What is it that catches your interest? Whether it's project management, like why project management? Because it's, how do you actually like get people to work together when everyone has opposing, you know, goals or different things like that? So there's a lot of fun nuance here that we get to play into. But the key thing, the main thing that companies want to hear is this great marketing term, with them. What's in it for me? If I'm going to give you $60, $70, $80, $90,000, what do I get in return? And if we can articulate that, we will stand above all the other candidates, because most candidates are saying, I know this technology. I know this other thing. I learned this. I've done that. But they forget to tie it to the business outcome. And if you think about any kind of marketing, right? Nike would never come to you and say, hey, our shareholders would like more money. Can you please buy some more Jordans? Right? What do they say? What does Nike say? They say, hey, do you like running trails? And you go, yeah, I love running trails. Do your knees ever hurt when you're running trails? And you're like, yeah, like literally they send out surveys. And then they go, okay, well, we have this new shoe that helps, people who are getting old, like this guy right here. We have a shoe that helps you, your knees not have so much shock or it absorbs the shock. And that would be really good for you to run trails. You want those shoes? And then we're like, damn it, they got me, oh, I got to go buy those stupid shoes now. Or, Supreme, they're like, they don't say, hey, would you like to buy our Supreme stuff? Because our founder figured out that if he put a big red logo on things, people would buy it. And he wants to make a lot of money. No one's going to buy it for that reason. But what they say is, hey, everyone who's cool on Instagram wears Supreme. Do you want to be cool on Instagram? Boom. Now you're buying Supreme, right? Because the goal is for you to be cool. The goal is for you to go for a run. The goal is for you to do something, right? So they appeal to what's in it for us. If we want money back from the company, we have to appeal to what's in it for them. More customers, better conversions, higher retention. What are the things that companies want more of? If we can talk about the business goals in a clear and concise way and explain how our job helps with those business goals, then we're golden, right? I know that my value as a career coach isn't my empathy, even though that's really what I deploy the most. My value as a career coach is honestly, at the end of the day, a little bit customer service. Like if someone graduates a boot camp and doesn't get career support and doesn't find a job, they're going to go blast that boot camp on Course Report. So I'm sort of there to be a teacher, to be a confidant, and to be customer service. Like there's like a real strange part of my role. And so when I'm talking with these companies, I make sure to address all the things. I say, I'll deal with the emotional side of things, so people will cry on the phone with me and not your customer service team. And I'll also help people get jobs by teaching workshops and things like that. So we'll improve your outcomes, and we'll have good reviews be written about your company. So when you think about the work you do, how does it impact the company's bottom line? I'll pause before going to the next slide because I'd love to hear some examples from you of how you think development helps companies make more money, get more customers, retain more people. What do you think?
I would, to your point, if the question is, what can you do for me? Or tell me a little bit about yourself. They purposely ask open-ended questions. And as a business owner, I've been in that position. And that's essentially, pardon my language, but to hear all the BS that you're going to tell them. And then kind of try to wade through that. And that person's got to make a decision. And so to your point, you have to play to what they want to hear, and you have to play to what their problems are. Because when you go to somebody and you tell them you're there to help them, as opposed to, oh, I'm just here to earn a paycheck, work 40 hours a week, get the benefits, medical, dental, whatever. That's a given. You're going to get a job. All that stuff is going to be there. And again, I also do not like it when people use the word passion, because come on, honestly, I was not born with the passion to become a data analyst. Who says that? I was not born to become have the passion to become an engineer. No, I just liked doing the work, or I liked solving complex problems. And it seems like you your company or your group, your team has problems that I believe my skills might be able to help with, and dig a little deeper into that. And, I could look at your data and work with your team and try to come up with an advertising campaign based on your data that would help you sell more and increase your revenue, something like that.
100%. Everything you're saying is right on point. Because like, think about that. You weren't like Mr. Salesman. You weren't like energy through the roof using buzzwords, right? You're just like, hey, look, here's what I can do. I can do this. I can do it well. Here's how I would do it. Here's the types of returns you might see. You can just be normal. Like, we don't have to overdo it, right? That's one of my favorite things about, I come from the marketing world. You'll find videos of me from 5-6 years ago where I'm like, hey, you got the coffee. And like, I'm like really in people's faces. And it's like, oh, it's exhausting. And like, you just want to be yourself. Hey, I really enjoy doing this. It helps your company in these ways. Here's how we can work together. And if you pay me $90K, your company will make $1.2 million because I'll implement some feature that's going to just blow up or whatever the thing might be. Obviously, we can't get into the numbers necessarily in an interview, but the knowledge that you need to have is that they're not going to pay any developer to join their team unless the ROI is multiples of what that salary is. So when we're sitting there with imposter syndrome, and especially when you're at the negotiation, you're going to start feeling like, oh my God, that's such a big number that I'm asking for. Oh my gosh, that's like, do I even deserve that much? It has nothing to do with you. And this, again, it's more about them than it is about you. They are hiring for this role because they know it's going to bring in more revenue than it's going to spend in expenses. So we don't even have to worry about that, right? Like Vic said, the baseline is you need a paycheck. The baseline is you need benefits. So whenever I talk to someone, I say, why do you want a job? And they say, because I need a paycheck. I go, so does everybody. Have fun in the job search because it's going to take you 10 years. But if someone says to me, I really enjoy reading these books about data analysis, and I need to work with a company to give me a huge data set to go play with, like, that's cool. And now we can start talking from that perspective. Hey, you're curious about it. You're interested in it. You have some sort of enjoyment or liking of this topic. And that also leads to better interviews, better stories, better conversations. Because if I talk to anyone in education, well, I have a lot of opinions on education because I've been in it so long, right? Especially in the bootcamp world. So if you get me talking about boot camps, I could talk your ear off for 10 hours if I wanted to. And but if you said, are you passionate about being a career coach, which every career coach says because we're all the most jargony people on the planet. Every single career coach is like, I just have a passion for helping people. I can't wait to see the faces. Like every time someone gets a job, I forget about them within like 20 minutes. I'm like, great, we're not working together. On to the next person. Like, I'm interested in human behavior, and I'm interested in helping people get past like their own self. And once they're past their own self, you don't need me anymore. I take no credit for anyone's jobs. I'm moving on. And like, because I'm more interested in the topic, in the psychology and in all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, there's some enjoyment when someone says they have a job, but honestly, I'm like, great, okay, that's one less person on my roster. Let's move. And so these are the things where it's like, when you find something that intrigues you, which you have because you just joined a boot camp and just went through this whole process, we can leverage that. I already know what I'm interested in. Now I just need to tie it to the company needs. All right. And so go ahead.
All right. I just want to ask you a real quick question. So what I'm trying to figure out right now as we're talking is I am worried about my first job, right? Mm-hmm. Your first job is the one that's going to be the scariest, right? After your first job, if you go on to a second job, whatever, you have a better understanding of what it looks like, how everything's supposed to work, right? In an interview for my first job, I will honestly tell you that I am not 100% confident in my coding abilities to make a huge difference in, you know, in the company's, I don't know, the end of the year, whatever.
Sure.
Right. But what I am confident in, and Brian can attest to this, but my number one strength is my work ethic. You know, if they put me in a role and I don't understand how it works, by God, I'm going to figure it out.
Sure.
Because that's what I can give, you know.
And how would that not impact their bottom line?
Well, so, and that's what I guess that's my question, you know. Do I need to rely on my knowledge as a web developer, or do I just need to rely on what my strengths are? You know, it's like, hey, I may not be the best web developer that you've ever met, but I work my ass off.
Both.
You know, and I work hard. You know, if I don't know the answer to a question, I will find it, and I will
Then
100%
both. 100%
Okay.
both. Because here's the thing, that's your job. Your job is to find answers. Your job is not to have answers. I don't have the answers to most of the things I'm asked. But over time, because I've been asked so many things, I've come up with a lot of answers. And every time I don't have the answer, I just Google it, and then we look at it together, and I provide my analysis of that answer. Like the first time someone asked me, what do I do to get a visa in America? I was like, I don't know. So I Googled how to get visas, and I sent them like 15 resources. And what I found out is that people don't Google. People are sitting there and they're like, Martin, what should I ask at the end of an interview? And I go, let's pull up Google. And they go, oh, right, Google exists. And I go, and then we go through the list of questions together, and I go, this sucks, that's good. Here's why this one's the right one, this one's not. Tweak this one in that way. Because I study language and I study persuasion, I don't necessarily have every answer. And so, you know, when someone comes to me and they're like, I'm going through divorce, what should I do? I'm like, what? Like, how does that affect your job search? I don't know, but it does. So I let them talk for a while. Or even better, when people come and talk to me about technical stuff, like technical interviewing. I'm not a developer. I'm not a cybersecurity expert. I don't know these answers. So what I do is I say, you're the expert on the technical side. Tell me everything you know. I'll turn it into a story you can tell. And then I don't even know what I'm saying half the time. I'm like, is what I repeated back to you making any sense? And they're like, yeah. And I go, great, let's put that in your resume, or let's put that into your story. And so that's where it's a teamwork thing, right? They're not going to put you on a project by yourself. You're not going to personally make the company $10 million necessarily, but you'll help the person on the team that's in the larger organization that makes the huge product that makes a ton of money. And just like the VP of marketing is going to take credit for everything that happens in that team, you contributed to the overall machine. And if you can contribute anything to the machine, then, you know, the machine makes enough money to pay your salary, and that's worthwhile. So don't feel like you
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Here's a question for you, Martin. So if let's flip chairs, and you're, sure, let's just say you're the interviewer. So yes, you're looking to hire a person. Doesn't matter whether they're new, not new, they have experience or not. You have a position and you're looking to hire a person with web development, data analytics, a little bit of data science knowledge or experience. What are the, and not just specific to that job, but in general as well, what would be the, let's just say, what are the top three, not criteria, but top three characteristics that you're looking for in this interviewee? And the reason I ask you that is, so now when you tell me those three characteristics, myself as an interviewee, now I have to figure out how do I weave my story into those characteristics to convince you to hire me.
Yes. So there's a lot there. And the first thing I want to say is, it looks like Ryan's joining. convincing someone to hire you. I think that if you were to look at it from a sales perspective is already coming from the wrong place, right? That's coming from the place that
well, maybe convincing is not the right word. Well, yeah. Convincing is not the right word, maybe. But
how do I get them
you get what I'm...
Yeah. But like a lot of times it is what people mean. So I'm just going to finish that point and then we'll jump into the next. So if they meet you and their initial reaction is, I'm probably not going to hire this guy, there's not really a lot we can do. Like there are tons of times when I walk into a room and I'm not the person they want. And there's no amount of BS that I can spin to get them to change their mind. I mean, maybe there is a certain amount, but like, then I'm going to just be in a position where I'm with people that don't want to be with me. So a lot of times it's not about convincing people. It's about doing it enough times that you find the right people. So I would say I convinced a lot of people in the marketing world to hire me until I left the marketing world because I didn't like it very much. And then when I got into education, I didn't have to convince anything because I would just start talking and they're like, I read that too. I listen to that podcast. Oh, I love that thing. And then we're just nerding out so hard that they can't not hire me for these roles. And so that's one thing. So your question was, what are the key things I need to weave into the story? Obviously, it depends on the job. But the number one thing that you're trying to do in every single, I'll say the two things you're trying to do in every single interview and every single interaction. Number one, build trust. And two, build rapport. So where I see a lot of people go wrong is that they answer the questions and they just answer the questions. What we want to do is build rapport. And I'm an introvert, so I'm not great at this, right? I told you about my panic attacks. So what we want to do is say, so tell me about yourself. All right, here's my little pitch. I give you my pitch. I end my pitch by saying, and I'm really curious to learn more about what your company is trying to do and see where I can bring value to the team. I can end it there, or I can say, what are some of the key things that you're focused on hiring for in this role? Now we're having a discussion about the role rather than having this dead silence before the next question. Or tell me a strength and a weakness. Here's my strength. Here's my weakness. Dead silence. Next question, right? And that awkwardness is what tends to mess people up in interviews versus saying, here's my strength. Here's my weakness. Here's how I see that affecting my work. What are the types of things you're looking for in this role? Or what are the strengths that you see the best people in this role having? And then now you're in a conversation about best attributes and whether or not you have them. So building rapport with people is what leads to trust. And asking good questions leads to trust. And leaving an interview, it's much better to leave an interview with them trusting you than getting every single thing right or saying all the right things. And so what I would say is when you look at the job description, rather than trying to say, oh, I need to mention all these things, say, what are they trying to do? Like, why are they trying to hire this role? What is the problem that the company has that they even want to spend money on someone to do these things? And so that helps me tailor everything, right? So in your case, you love data. So what you should be talking about in every interview is, here's what my approach to data is. Here's how it helps companies. What are the things you're trying to do with your data? And let's talk about how I might be able to help you with that. If you can just keep bringing it back to the data, they're going to leave going, that's the data guy. We got to talk to the data guy again, right? Whenever I'm talking to people, I'm like, I'm the marketing background career coach. And I just keep hitting that home. And they go, that guy probably knows how to do Patreon. Let's go talk to him about Patreon. I'm doing a talk with the American Marketing Association about LinkedIn Live this week. Like, people know to come to me for marketing and career stuff. What do you want people to come back to you for? And that's really what we want to get home or hit home. So each of you, so Joe, you're going to be project management. So you can say, my background in business, my focus on tech, I do project management for tech, and I can't wait to help your team make your projects more efficient. Where do you feel like your projects are going off the rails right now? Are you using Agile? Are you using this? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? How are you approaching it in these ways? Here's how I might be able to help. And if we can do that, we can shorten your timelines, get more projects done, get more things live, and increase your revenue. I know that was a long-winded answer. Did I get everything for you, Vic? Is there anything that I didn't hit on that you wanted me to?
No, that's good. Those 2 points make complete sense. I mean,
Cool.
At the end of the day, I have to make my story and weave those 2 points.
Yeah,
building trust, building rapport and building trust.
Yeah, it's merging your story and their problem. That's really the goal here. And so this brings us to what should we say instead? I heard that you have big goals for your business. Here's how I can help you solve problems and grow. All right. I saw some notes, so I'll leave it up for a sec. Okay. So here's the questions that we're asking. What problems do they have? What skills do I have? Where do those come together? I feel like we hit those pretty good. Then we have to back up what we say with stories. So like I said at the beginning, if I tell you I'm a nice guy, but I don't give you an example, you're going to go, is he just saying that? Right? So we always want to have good stories to back things up. Like I kind of tossed out flippantly that, you know, sometimes I deal with people who are going through divorces, right? Doesn't come up very much in conversation, does it? So when I'm in an interview and they say, tell me about your approach to coaching, I go, well, I take a very empathetic approach. No, what I typically say is I'll say I like to approach coaching with an emotional and promotional lens. And they'll go, what does that mean? And I'll go, well, on the emotional side, you know, sometimes people will talk to me about suicide. Sometimes people will talk to me about divorce. Sometimes people will talk to me about depression. And I've had to learn over the years where to set boundaries and how to help people navigate those emotional issues. And then also how to help them seek help beyond coaching where we can't help. And then on the promotional side, I really like to help people with their marketing and their wording and so on and so forth. So I'm able to back it up with stories. I'll tell a story about a certain person I coached and something that they went through. Or I'll tell a story about a certain person whose pitch I helped craft and how that helped them in an interview. Again, these are two different things that I'll talk about in different situations. I won't always say everything. But the goal here is if I just say, I help people with emotional problems, you're like, great, what does that mean? But if I tell you a story about someone who's going through a divorce in their job search and how much of an effect they had, and I go into real detail on it, you are not going to forget who I am at the end of that interview, right? You're going to be like, that dude can deal with some shit. And that's really what I want to get across sometimes, right? And so it also helps people know what to reach out to me for. A lot of times I'll start my calls and I'll say, here's the 3 things that we typically will talk about on these calls. And I'll break it down for people. So for you, the stories that you tell are going to bring your jargon to life. It's going to bring your buzzwords to life. Without the story, it's just air. And that's where people will get into the trap of saying things like, I'm a hard worker. What the hell does that mean? I procrastinate. That's my weakness. What the hell does that mean? Give me an example. You know, if I don't have an example, I'll fill it with my worst interpretation. And probably the biggest place this goes wrong is tell me about a conflict with a coworker. Someone goes, well, this one time I had a coworker and we would have conflicts, but we resolved them and things are good now. The hell? I have no idea what happened. Like, what was that story? Could you imagine going to a movie and they're like, it's just someone sitting there and they're like, drugs and the cops and it's over. Like if I'm watching friggin', what am I watching right now? I'm watching the one with Colombia, drug lord. What am I watching? Narcos. Yeah. If they were just like, so there was a guy who sold drugs and eventually we caught him and he's dead now. I'd be like, what happened? Can you tell me the story? Like, no, they draw it out over like 100 episodes. I'm like, when is this guy going to get caught? God, geez, just catch him already. Right. I'm like invested. I'm like so invested in this dude who died in the 90s. Anyway, so that's what we're doing with our stories. We're getting them invested in us, in what we do. Right. And also we're connecting our stories to them. Right. If I tell a story of someone I coach that's really emotional, And then at the end of that story, I say, what are your students dealing with? They're going to make the connection that you could do this for our students. And God forbid, you know, when I say my weakness is data, God forbid someone who's on the data team has to deal with someone who's crying. They would not want to do that, right? I don't want to deal with data. They don't want to deal with crying. So we're in a perfect heavenly match if we ever get on the same team together, right? And this is how we can really position ourselves. So how do we tell them what we do? I'm belaboring the point here. So our past paved the way to our present. And this is one of the things that I really want to reiterate here, is that what you've done before definitely influences what you do now. Now, the problem is most people focus on the negative, right? They say, I used to do this and I hated it, so I left, and now I do this. Hell, I even said that earlier when I was talking about marketing, right? But my pitch to you at the beginning of the call wasn't about that. I waited like 20, 30 minutes in before I talked about how I got frustrated with marketing. My pitch is about why I was in marketing in the first place. I love behavior, human behavior, studying human behavior. I wanted to know how they manipulated my behavior, and I wanted to be able to reverse engineer that. And that led me into education and coaching. I connected the past with the future, right? So for you, you know, Joe, you've said, you know, I have this background in business and it's taught me about project management. And now I'm bringing in the tech skill set so I can be that much more, you know, better of a scalpel, right? In doing my job. Vic, you talked about your background as an engineer and how that informed your present interest in data and data analysis, right? So we always want to bring our past into the present and the future, even if it's something that we don't love talking too much about. I had someone who's like, well, I was a professional poker player for 4 years. I don't want to talk about that because people think it's skeezy. And I go, you know what's skeezier than being a professional poker player for 4 years? Being someone who's a mystery man for 4 years. What'd you do? Murder someone and go to jail? Because I'm going to fill it in with all the worst thoughts in my head, right? Like, I'd rather you tell everyone you're a poker player, which actually is fascinating. They make movies about it and have an entire ESPN channel for it.
It's all about statistics.
Yeah,
so it plays right in.
Exactly. And this person was a data analyst. Like, that's what they studied. So I'm like, it would be way better for you to tell everyone that you're a professional poker player and now you're trying to go legit or whatever, however you want to phrase it, than to just not say anything and they think you're a deadbeat. Like, I'd rather you be like, imagine that person gets to an interview and they say, oh, I used to be a professional poker player. And that person they're talking to has like a game every Friday night with their buddies. That person's going to hire you and you're going to be the one that runs the like hidden office poker parties, right? Like, that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to get to here, right? I put things like Spider-Man in my presentations because I know someone's going to be like, oh man, I got that Rick and Morty reference or something like that. And we're going to connect on that. And that kind of weird, subtle stuff comes through. And so here's where we actually want to talk about our projects. So when you pitch yourself, you say, here's what I like, here's how it helps your company. And then you give a story that verifies that, right? So in my previous role, I was analyzing this data and we got these results. And this is the kind of stuff that I enjoy doing. I can't wait to do it for your company, right? In my previous role, I managed these projects and it taught me these things. And I can't wait to bring that project management skill set to this role. So that's how we can actually tie it in, by pulling from our projects, by pulling from our previous roles, by doing all these different things. So if I really needed to, I could dig into, I don't know, some of the user experience stuff I did when I was in the marketing world to talk about how my coaching approach is or something like that. Go ahead.
I have a question here, Martin. You say here, how do we talk about our studies or projects? And you're saying, talk about what you did, not about what you learned. But
oh no, talk about go ahead.
If you want to be positive about your past, right? A lot of people have bad experiences and they leave 1 job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs. But at the same time, like you mentioned in the slide before this, you don't want to be negative. You want to be positive. You want to focus on the positive. And part of being that is focusing or telling the story that you learned something out of. So I'm a little confused.
You're absolutely
when you say
right.
Here,
I'm realizing that this is not written well, and I probably need to change this slide. So when I say talk about what you did, not what you learned, I'm specifically referencing when people say, I learned how to, look up an API. And they'll say that in an interview. And what I'm trying to say is talk about what you did with the API, not that you learned how to use an API. Do you get what I'm saying? So I got to fix this slide.
So I think the larger idea is, sure, you should talk about what you did, but then from the learning perspective, not like a specific, I learned how to type 100 words a minute, but talk about what you learned out of the whole process or as an experience, what you took from it. That's what you're trying to say here.
Yes. So most people, when they write their resume, they'll be like, used X API. And that's the whole bullet. And I go, what the hell are you talking? Like, what is this going to tell me? Like, I don't care that you used an API. You used an API to do what? Or they'll say built in Python. What does that mean? I created this app utilizing Python to achieve this goal, right? I want what you did with the Python. I want what you did with the API. I want what you did with the different technologies, not just the fact that you use them. So you're right. I have to fix this slide.
Well, I think too, if I interject real quick, looking again from an interviewer point of view, like it wouldn't matter to me what you've learned, because sometimes even someone that's doing the hiring doesn't completely know what it is that you're being hired for. I did have one job where I was hiring people. I didn't really know what it is they were doing or the purpose of their job. I just needed to make sure that they seemed like a good fit for the role, right? So as an interviewer, it's like, I don't care what you've learned. I just want to know what it is that you've done so that I can take that experience and go, okay, so he did this. We could use something like that, in his specific role or in this area, right? Because what you've learned doesn't necessarily mean anything unless you've done something with it.
You're absolutely right. Like if I told you that I tracked progress in spreadsheets, you're like, cool. But if I told you I tracked progress in spreadsheets in order to improve our webinars or something like that, now you know why I did it, right? And it's the why that matters. So you're both absolutely right. It's telling a specific story and then telling why that's even relevant. And if you can, what did you learn from that experience and how can it help in the next role? So the learning thing, and I'm going to get off this slide because I think it is a bit confusing. The learning thing is on the negative side, it's when people only say, I learned this thing. On the positive side, it's when you say, I did this thing and it taught me this about myself or about my work or about how I help companies. So let's say you worked in a job that you didn't like. Rather than saying, I hated that job, we say, in that job, I did these things. The thing I enjoyed most about that job was this thing, but I only got to do that like 20% of the time. So I learned that I needed to be a web developer so that I could do that as the majority skill set of my work. So what I learned from my last job is that I need to be in this place. So I'll use myself as an example. In marketing, I was behind the scenes. I never got to interact with real people. I was just constantly doing spreadsheets and data and posting stuff online, right? And then every once in a while, I'd get to meet the customer. And that was my favorite part. But it was like 10% of my job. So now I work in education where 90% of my job is dealing with people and only 10% is behind the scenes. And that's a much better fit for me because I really enjoy that interaction. So it's an evolution based on what I learned about myself rather than a running away from a job towards something else, if that makes sense. And then we can put it into a story arc. So this is just classic storytelling stuff, nothing new, nothing too crazy. But Basically, if you think about every movie you've watched, every story you've watched, they follow a typical cycle. There's a state that exists, an incident that happens, a action that is taken, a resolution or a climax that's hit, and then a falling action to the end. So if you think about a project you've done, most people will just launch in and start talking about a bunch of detailed jargon. We want to slow down and we want to break it out. We were running the company and everything was going fine until this issue arose. That's the incident, right? This issue arose, so we had to respond. Here is how we responded. We started building these things, implementing these things. Then we launched our new project. And here were all the results, and here is the outcome. All right. So whenever we're telling a story, there's a lot of different types of story arcs. This is just one, but we can say, like, you know, I was working on this project, a problem occurred. Here was my approach to solving it. Here was the outcome, and here was what we learned. So I like to break this down in like bullet points. Like if you're doing bullet points for your resume, I did this using this to achieve this. I did this using this to achieve this. So I launched a microsite using Python to enable this ability for the customer. All right. And when we think about everything as a story, from the bullets in our resume to the stories that we tell in interviews, it becomes much easier to flow through a conversation and build rapport. I'm going to pause there because I'm saying a lot. Any questions on this? Because I know I'm throwing a ton of stuff at you.
It's good, Martin. It's really good. It's,
cool.
It's, especially interviews, is good to really just kind of, like you said earlier, just have a conversation, just engage with them and be a person, because people want to hire people they like,
Exactly.
People who seem like they're real people, that they want to be around 8 hours a day in the office, you know, and not just someone who's reciting studied answers on interview websites.
Exactly. And like, honestly, you know, the reason we have to practice this is because we have it all in our heads. We just don't know how to articulate it. And the only way to get good at storytelling is to tell the story. And if you think about a comedian, right? The first time a comedian tells a joke, they hope they're in a tiny little room with like 20 people. They don't want their Netflix special to be the first time they tell that joke, because it's going to bomb and it's not going to be good. They're probably going to have to refine it for a year for it to be pretty good. Even Chris Rock will go to like a tiny little hole in the wall to practice because he doesn't want people to see it. And that's how you get good at these things. You have to tell your stories over and over. It seems crazy. It seems like you're insane, but I highly recommend downloading a list of questions, interview questions, and just hitting record on your phone and just stream of conscious. Just stream of conscious, answer all the questions, and then listen to it. Your brain will automatically start fixing the ums and the tangents and the everything. Like, hell, even what I'm saying right now, I've said before, right? It just becomes easier and easier as you go. And then these things become kind of grooved in your head. And then every once in a while, I'll toss out a new story that I've not practiced, and I tend to turn bright red because I don't know how to tell it, you know? But as you get better, you'll just keep getting better. So it's about practice in that case. And how do we stop rambling? One question, one answer. One question, one answer. When I say, what are your strengths and weaknesses? It sounds, because there's an S at the end, it sounds like I want multiple strengths and multiple weaknesses. I can't retain all that information. Hell, this presentation's too much for you guys. I should have probably made it even simpler. But the truth is that people can only really retain 1 to 3 things that you say. So how do we stop rambling? Say fewer things. When I ask someone, what are your strengths and weaknesses? They'll be like, I'm a hard worker. I love collaboration. I really like solving problems. And my weaknesses are that I try too hard, and that I am really, you know, obsessive, and that I procrastinate. And I'm like, I have no idea what you just said. You've thrown so much at me. I want to run away. So what we want to do instead is say, here's my strength. Here's an example. Here's my weakness. Here's an example. And here's how they kind of play together. And that's it. And we can tie it back to their company. We can do more stuff there. But really, basically, it's that, right? So tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker. Don't talk about 3 different conflicts. talk about one conflict well. And again, the reason you want to practice these things before you get there is because if you start talking about an actual conflict with someone that you hate, you will get transported back to that emotion. And this wonderful interview that's been going so great is suddenly going to get very weird because you're going to be flush and angry and your tone is going to change. And I know this from experience. I talked about a certain person that I worked with that I was not super keen on. And I'm like bright red and like on the verge of like getting angry in this interview. And then they're like, all right, next question. And I'm like, how do I change gears now? Right? We're like off the rails. So like practice these stories until they become benign, or tell a different conflict, like one that doesn't hit you so hard in the shins, you know? So just some things to think on. When it comes, go ahead.
I got a question. I guess my question is, because I know that you stated earlier to build trust and build rapport, but we don't want to allow ourselves to start rambling, right? So one question, one answer with an example. When do we start to build the rapport? Like, how will we incorporate that into that so we won't start rambling? You know what I mean?
Sure.
You get what I'm asking you?
I think so. And so how do you build rapport without rambling? So I guess one thing I'll say is it's okay to ramble a little. I ramble on every one of these presentations. If you watch this video next to the last one that I did a month ago, you're like, this is a totally different presentation. This guy just makes shit up every time, which I do. And the key thing is like, it's okay to ramble as long as you can bring yourself back. I'm much more interested in how you respond to going off the rails than whether or not you go off the rails. So if we get an answer wrong, or if we go off on a tangent, or if something happens, the recovery is more important than the tangent. So let's say someone asks you a question in an interview and you answer the wrong question, right? Like somehow the wire got crossed and you start talking about something unrelated. I think that's happened to me for sure. And what ends up happening is you start going on this tangent, and then you catch yourself and you go, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm answering the right question. Some people freeze. Some people totally freeze and they choke up. Like that example I gave of me trying to give my elevator pitch. I got a frog in my throat and I literally just turned to him and said, can I start over? And he's like, I guess. And I tried again and I froze and he goes, yeah, I guess you can start over again. And then that was the third time I choked. He's like, dude, I got things to do. Bad response. Good response would have been, well, let's get away from that example because I don't know if I could have salvaged that. But a good response if I go on a tangent would be, I'm sorry, I got really excited about this topic. It just happens. I want to make sure I'm answering your question appropriately. Restate their question and then give a succinct answer. So just to make sure I'm answering your question right, was this your question? They confirm it, then we give an answer. And we try and make it as succinct as possible. So your recovery is important here. So let's say you get an answer wrong. Let's say you literally get asked a tech question and it's completely wrong, okay? A good recovery, once you realize you're wrong, would be, you know, I realized I didn't quite touch on that topic in the way that I was hoping to. I'm gonna go home and research that tonight and send you a little bit of a write-up on the right answer there. I hope that's all right with you or something like that. And then what you get to do is follow up. I've seen people go home after bombing an interview, write up an analysis of what they got wrong, send it and get the next interview because they bounced back in such a great way. And that's really what they're looking for, right? They're looking for someone who, even if you screw up, you can admit it and you can respond well to it. If you screw up and then run away and then ignore all their calls, like that's the bad thing, right? People want someone like use the relationship analogy again, right? It's better to admit you're wrong, apologize, and get back on track than to just ignore that anything happened and pretend like everything's normal. Like that's the weird thing. Like if I screwed up in an interview and then pretended nothing happened, I'd be like, this is the strangest dynamic in the world, right? So I feel like I missed part of your question though. Did I get the whole question?
Yeah, you did good. You did good. I was just trying to see, because you know, sometimes you only get like maybe 30 minutes in an interview.
Yeah.
But you want to make sure that you hit everything while answering the questions appropriately, while also building rapport. Because I know you stated that, for example, what's your strength? And then you state your strength, then you state your example. And then earlier you stated, ask the interviewer, what strength does your most valuable employee exude?
Got
Or
it.
something like that. You know what I mean? So I was just trying to figure out how to tie all of that in without taking too much time.
Yes. Okay. So a few things there. Building rapport is asking questions. So you don't have to ask a question after every single one that you do, just a few times, like at the beginning and the end. And sometimes you don't ask any questions because you're not comfortable. And then at the end, they say, what questions do you have for me? And that's where you can build rapport.
And that's the floor. Okay.
Yeah. So you can definitely build it there too. The other thing is don't feel like you have to get every point across. There's a ton of stuff in this presentation that I'm not going to get to because I'm rambling, because I ramble. Like I just accept that about myself. And so, you know, I got I taught these high schoolers once, and they gave feedback after every day of the presentations. And some of them loved me, but some of them were like, tell this dude to shut the fuck up. Like they literally wrote that in the thing. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm in front of you guys for 8 hours. Like, I don't know. I got to keep talking. So it's funny. Like I can look back on it and laugh, but like, these are the things where it's like, it's fine because the point gets across. Like your excitement and your interest and your willingness to help are more important than getting every single point across. And the same goes for like a presentation. It's more important that I'm engaging with you and answering your questions than getting to everything on my slides, because you're only going to remember 3 things from this anyway. And I'm already giving you too much. So that's the first thing, is let yourself off the hook a little bit. And then there's a lot of times, a lot of instances where you start to connect with the person and they will just let it go on. I've had so many people who are like, I was scheduled for 30 minutes and we went to 45. I was scheduled for 30 minutes. We went to an hour. One of my very first clients back before I was even a career coach, I was a branding coach. He's like, I went to this interview. It was supposed to be a half hour. I was there for 3.5 hours. We talked about everything. We talked about family, life, kids, working out. I was like, dude, he's like, yeah, I got that job, $60,000 raise. I was like, what? And I wasn't even a career coach at the time. Like, these are the things that it's okay. And if you get to the end of I think the best interviews are the ones where you get to the end and they're like, oh my gosh, we didn't even get to the things I wanted to talk about because we had so much fun talking about this stuff. And they're like, we got to get you back on the phone next week. And now you've got the second round. So you're almost kind of leaving them wanting more. So those are great things that can happen. And then of course there's bad rambling, but that just gets better with practice. So cut yourself a little slack, but I think trying to keep it concise, trying to tell one story, and then asking pointed questions rather than like too many questions would probably be the best way to keep it tight.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Perfect.
My very long rambling answer to a question about rambling. Okay. What is the right story order? So a lot of times we want to hit on keywords over necessarily like the chronology, right? So when someone says, tell me about yourself, typically we'll say, I was born here, and then I went to school here. And unless they went to that school, no one cares. So typically what we want to do is hit on the things they care about first. Then we can tie in our history, and then we can bring it back to what they care about again. So if I introduce myself, I typically start with, I'm currently a career coach doing these things. I got here through my background in marketing, and here's how it helps you today. Rather than, I used to be a marketer. And they're like, what does that have to do with anything, right? It's present, past, future. That's the setup. So if you're pitching yourself, present, past, future. Here's what I do today. Here's how I got here. And here's how it helps you. I'll keep that one short. And then when should we tell our stories? So they'll typically come out in the elevator pitch, the LinkedIn summary, interview answers, all the stuff we've been talking about up to this point. So we'll hit on that a little later. So a couple of questions you can ask yourselves in order to be able to tell a good story is pick a favorite project from the program. Write down what problem you solved in that project, a very specific problem, maybe one within, not the whole project's problem, but one problem like, oh, we had a API issue, or we had a research issue, or we had a user issue, or we had a design issue. Pick a very specific problem that you solved, pick the skills you used to solve it, and the outcome you got. And you could probably come up with 2 or 3 per project. It's just a good way to sort of lay out your stories. Problem, approach to the solution, the skills that you used, and the outcomes you got. And then we can give our pitch. So how do we pitch ourselves? A pitch is a very simplified version of our story, and it's used to communicate our value to employers. So, you know, I'm reading straight off the slide here, which is always terrible, but basically what we're trying to do is give them a very quick summary of why we're here and what value we bring them. So how do we actually do it? I've already hit on the present, past, future. And this goes back to the point earlier that was called out. We want to talk about what we've learned about ourselves through each of the transitions. Oh, I could probably update this Animaniacs image now with a high quality one because they've rebooted. So we've got, sorry, tangents, but we always want to talk about what we learned in each of these transitions, right? In my last job, I did this. It taught me this about myself, which led me to make a decision to go to a boot camp, which has now allowed me to help your business in these ways. All right, so we're tying all these things together. And here's how you shorten it, right? So this is my absolute simplest possible outline for a pitch. If you were to make it a single sentence, here's what I would recommend you write. And what we can do is take this single sentence and expand on it for other areas of use. So if someone were to just literally ask me straight on, tell me about yourself, and I needed to give a 1-sentence answer, this is what I would use. If I could do 3 sentences, I would use this and expand on it a little bit. If I was going to put it on my LinkedIn, I would tweak it for more of a written thing. If I were to put it in my cover letter, I would maybe expand it to a paragraph, right? But merging a background in this and that, I help companies do this to get this outcome. Here's what it looks like in real life. Merging a background in customer service and web development, I help companies create amazing experiences for their users across the web. Now, this could be even stronger if you say create amazing experiences that boost retention, or create amazing experiences that boost conversion, or reduce the number of clicks, or whatever it is you want to say. But I'm going to give you a few minutes here to do this for yourself. So we've got 5 minutes. See if you can write your version of this. Merging my background in this and that, I help companies do this and get these outcomes. So for me personally, it's merging a background in marketing and education, or marketing and professional development, or marketing and coaching, however I want to say it. Merging a background in marketing and career coaching, I help companies improve student outcomes through career coaching. I screwed that up. Merging a background in marketing and professional development, I help companies improve student outcomes through career coaching. That's how I would write this. But again, you can see I kind of tweak it in the example. So I'm going to pause because I'm talking too much. If you have questions as you're trying to write this, speak up and we can do it together on the call. Once you have yours, toss it in the chat. If you're struggling, let me know and we can talk through it together.
There was another Zoom call that we had with, I can't remember her name. She's kind of been helping us out too.
Mira?
Anyway, yeah, Mira. And so the issue that I have when trying to answer questions like this is like, how do I relate my background in auto mechanics to web development? And how do those two, for this specific question, how do those two come together?
What did you enjoy most about your role in that company?
That's a great question. To be honest with you, not much.
Yeah.
I mean, I although I've done it my entire life, I think that my negatives for the industry and what I've been doing has started to overcome my positives. And so anymore, I've just kind of concentrated on the negatives anymore.
100%. Makes total sense, man. Every time we leave a role, we're leaving because we're fed up with it, right? Every time we make a big transition like this. When I left marketing, I was like, go to hell, right? Go to hell marketing. But you have to realize that there was, at least at one point, something we enjoyed about the job, whether it was the people or some of the work that we did or something somewhere in there. And hitting on that is really important in order to reframe our career story in a positive light. And, it might have been working with like helping a customer with something, or might have been collaborating with someone, or working with your hands, or whatever the thing might have been. Maybe just the fact that you could look at a car and take it apart and put it back together. I don't know. Like what if you were to really dig in, what do you think comes to mind?
I think there's a certain satisfaction in having a customer bring a car in with a problem and me knowing how to fix that problem and then give the car back to them in the condition they had it.
Yeah, you were debugging cars.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So it's the exact same skill set. Someone comes in with a highly complex machine that they don't know what to do with, that isn't working correctly, and you get in there and you change things around and it works now. And one way you were doing it was with, carburetors and engines, and now you're doing it with the back end of a computer, which is the exact same thing. So same skill set in a way. So it's that same problem solving skill set that you mentioned earlier, right? So merging a background in, how would you phrase it? I would do auto repair. Okay. So merging a background in the automotive industry with my current work as a web developer, I help companies troubleshoot or debug or improve the efficiency of their websites in order to get their online presence running smoothly. And I like that, running smoothly, because it kind of ties into the car, right? So you can make it fun too. So like that is typically how we can break it down. And again, this feels very robotic, right? And it has to be because we're doing a template. But when you're actually talking to people in real life, you just be a little more colloquial with it, right? You kind of say, hey, when I was working as an auto mechanic, I loved being able to, have a customer come in, like in an interview, you could say, like, I loved that customers would come in and have no idea what was going on in their car, and I could tell them exactly what it was. And that's the same thing that happens in the web world. I'm working with a client and they come in and they're like, I don't understand why this is glitching, or that's frozen, or this isn't loading. And I can go in and I can figure it out for them and like open the hood of their computer and, metaphorically like, hey, maybe you like that part too. But you kind of get what I'm getting at. And so you can tie it together in that way. It can be pretty loose, but it's a positive story about your transition rather than a negative one.
Right. Okay.
Does that help? Does that give you some ideas of where to go with it?
Yeah, definitely. I guess it's just in my mind, it's like auto mechanics and web development have nothing to do with each other, you know, and sometimes it's just, I don't know. This whole experience, even with Coding Temple and everything, is such a new concept and idea to me that it's taken me a little longer to figure out some of these finer points of it. I mean, I can do the work fine, but trying to figure some of this other, you know, like LinkedIn, I've never used LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You know, like,
it's a big learning curve. It's a big learning curve.
It's just all of this stuff are things I've never had to do. I grew up in a small town where, you know, I've worked for my dad for my entire, you know, I tell people, you know, I've worked in the auto mechanic field for about 20 years now, you know, and they're like, 20 years, you're not that old. It's like, well, I grew up in that shop, you know, I mean, from day one, I've practically been down there every day. And as soon as I could hold a wrench, I was helping my dad. You know, but in a small town, all the other jobs that I've had are people that either know me, have known my father. You know, I've never been interviewed. You know, except for one time, I got a job for a dealership. But then again, it's the same, you know, auto mechanics. It's like, look, I know how to do this. You know, I've done this stuff my whole life. You should hire me because of it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really what it came down to. But this kind of stuff.
There's one thing I do want to, I feel you, man. And it is a big learning curve, and it's one that, you know, take in stride. Remember, we're trying to build lifelong skills here, not just become, you know, the world's best LinkedIn person. It's hell, I've been doing LinkedIn every day for a year, and I'm like, really? I don't have any traction yet? Okay, thanks. I have some traction. I shouldn't totally dump on myself, but like I went to the dentist a couple weeks ago, and I was sitting there and I was like, this person's like a tooth mechanic, right? Like everything is like a thing. So there's this story you're telling yourself. And this is the part we don't go too deep into in this presentation, but it's really important. We all have a story in our head, and you've told that story twice. So if you actually go back and rewatch this, because I'll upload the video, you have the exact same story in the exact same words in the exact same order going through your head on repeat. It's something that I like to call the tape recorder. We all have this tape recorder, and like something happens and it triggers us to hit play, and then that tape recorder just goes and our brain kind of shuts off. I have one too. We all do. My buddy has one about like family drama. I've heard the story like 15 times. He doesn't even realize he's saying the exact same words over and over again. So these are the stories that we need to change. And we're getting deep into psychology. We're getting deep into like even therapy here, but it's called reframing. When we can reframe a story, we can change the story. And whenever we remember something, we can remember it a little differently. And so if the story is, I've never gotten a job, I've never had to interview, I've never had to go through this process before, what that's doing is it's kind of cutting you off at the knees to be able to learn these things. Because in your mind, the story says, we don't do this, we don't do this, we don't do this. What we need to do is say, I am someone who at the age of 7 or whatever you said, picked up a wrench and started doing things. That's the story I want to focus on. The kid who was able to pick up a wrench and start learning stuff without even knowing what the hell you were doing, right? Because if you were able to pick up a wrench at a young age and start fixing cars, then there's no reason you can't pick up LinkedIn and start learning that the same way you would an engine. And if you treat it the same way, if you treat it with the same level of, you know, oh yeah, okay, so I just twist this and that happens, and I do this and that happens, like treat it like anything else, then it's not as much of a kind of repetitive story. We can kind of shift it. So we focus on, oh, I'm someone who can learn. And I was talking to someone recently about this. They're like, a big piece of what we have to learn as adults is that we can still learn new things. And it might be a little slower, it might be a little whatever. But my personal example was when I, at like the age of like 27 or something, learned how to skateboard. And then of course I fell and hurt myself. But hey, I learned how to skateboard and I really enjoy it. And like that kind of stuff, you know, when I was 12, I wanted to learn how to skateboard. And then I just figured I'd never do that in my entire life. But doing that, it doesn't mean I'm going to go do any real skateboarding. I have no interest in hurting myself again. But it does mean that I've proven to myself that physically I can learn a new thing. So now I can go learn weightlifting or yoga or something else. And so a big piece of these stories that we tell ourselves is disproving the stories in our heads in order to move past these barriers that are set up so that we can actually get that job and do that work. Because honestly, again, once you get in there and talk to people, you're going to find out they're just like you. Like when I got into advertising and realized that people didn't even know what the hell YouTube and Instagram was, I was like, really? I thought you were the advertisers. I thought this was Mad Men. What the hell's going on? Like, we're still doing radio? Like, what is happening here? Like, no one had even like listened to podcasts. I was like, how has no one listened to podcasts? And like, now they're the biggest thing ever, right? So like, it's kind of amazing. Like, you're going into companies that need help. Like, that's the whole point of a job search, right? They need help, and they're putting up a big red flag saying, we don't know what we're doing, come help us. They're not like brilliant experts who like just want you to come in and like do their bidding. They're a mess. Like, every company's a mess. Every company is like, how are we going to make payroll? Right? Like, every company is like figuring shit out, and our entire goal is to help them with a small piece of that puzzle. And if you can help a little bit, you're golden.
Okay.
That's a long-winded answer, but I hope it was helpful.
That's fine. I don't mind long-winded answers, because sometimes it just helps to fortify, you know, in my mind what it is that we're discussing. I can, you know, again, ask Brian, I could be kind of long-winded sometimes.
Absolutely. And again, write it down. Write down these things and listen to them. Like, having a podcast and hearing myself sucks. Like, no one wants to listen to their own voice. But I listen to myself. I listen to my live stream once in a while. Not every day. I can't do it. I can't listen to myself that much. But I do a live stream every single morning. And every once in a while, I'll tune in and I'll go, oh, that was insightful. How come you don't remember that in your day-to-day? I'm like, how come you say that on the live stream, but you don't do it? Do that, man. Or I'll go read a journal from a year ago and I'll be like, hey, you did that thing. You followed through. Good for you, man. Like, I love externalizing things so that I can like look at myself like a friend. Like that's like the weird cliche that they say. It's like, treat yourself like a friend you're trying to help, rather than what we do, which is beat ourselves up all day.
Okay.
Merging a background in engineering and small business ownership, I help companies make sense of their data and use those insights to contribute to the bottom line of their company. I love it, but which bottom line? When you say to the bottom line, what thing does data help most? Is it customer retention? Is it finding new audiences? Like, and again, you don't have to be hyper specific necessarily. This can be your generic one, and you can tailor it to each company as you go. I'm just
right. I mean, I could say I could replace bottom line with I could say top line revenue of your team. I could say customer retention. I could say increasing your profit margins. I mean,
100%. And sometimes I'm like, we engage your job seekers. We, pull in your alumni. We do all sorts of different things. Like, again, I think this is really good. So it's a great baseline to start with. Merging a background in business analytics and web development, I help companies identify deficits, create solutions, increase retention, and increase revenue. Solid. Love it. What do you mean by identify deficits?
Their problem, like where they're losing money at.
So I help companies identify, because we want to make it specific to your work. So identify website, identify opportunities to improve their website, or identify or troubleshoot website issues, or, we can make it a little more specific there.
Specific. Okay. Okay.
And then we've got merging a background in client development and coding. I help clients understand the solution to potentially complex needs, but in a clearly communicated and human way. Okay, so this one is a little more on the high level side. So I'd want to know, you help me understand complex solutions to complex needs. I want to know the needs. I want to know. So like, if I said I help people understand their passions, you're like, what? What does that mean, Martin? But if I say, I help you troubleshoot your resume, fix your LinkedIn, and get a job, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, so being specific is good.
Cool.
That's why I don't sell passion. Some people do, and a lot of people get hosed. So sorry, being a little critical. So yeah, we write our pitch, we do our best. And again, this is very formulaic. So you're going to want to write it down, practice it, and then put it away and start talking like a human and seeing if you can get this across in more human ways. So we already did this share out. The way you use this in your job search is you can put it in your LinkedIn summary. You can put it in your resume summary at the top. You can say it when you answer, tell me about yourself. So you can literally say, hey, tell me about yourself. Well, I merge a background in engineering, small business ownership, and coding in order to help companies make sense of their data. What that means, and then you give an example. And then you say, and I'm really excited to learn more about your company's data and the things you're trying to achieve with it. Boom. You've got a great intro there. We didn't talk about what school you went to. We didn't talk about where you grew up, because honestly, that doesn't matter. What we're talking about is their problems, and we're setting a tone of I'm here to help, and boom, you're right into it. Now, again, you don't have to use the exact words here. You can say, well, I started my career in engineering and small business ownership, and that taught me these things, which led me into coding and data, and here's how I help businesses. So you can be much more conversational about it. So really good job, everyone. I really like these pitches and how they came together. Good job. And with that, hey, we actually have oh no, we went a minute over. I thought I had done a good job. Damn, I went a whole minute over.
All right, it's all right.
But if you have questions, I'm willing to stick around for a couple minutes and answer them.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm teaching class tonight, so it's a shorter lecture. So if you guys do have questions, feel free to take the time now.
Hey, Martin, question, man. You mentioned like like prepping on common questions and stuff like that ready for the interview. Can you? If you do research, you see like all kinds of questions you get asked, and some are super outdated. No one asks anymore. Is there like a reference you can refer to, or like a good site you can look at to like find those good questions?
themuse.com is a great site. They have, if you go to their search articles, you'll find 10,000 articles. Typically what I like to do, it's not really about answering all the questions. It's about finding enough stories that could answer all the questions. So this is almost like thinking like a politician, where what we want to do is have 6 really good stories that we want to tell in the interview. Maybe we'll only get to 3 of them, but we have 6 in our back pocket. And when they ask me a question about a conflict, I'm going to tell this story. When they ask me a question about leadership, I'm going to tell that same story, but from the leadership perspective. So, hey, Martin, tell me about a time you showed leadership in a previous role. Oh, well, this one time I managed a team and I hired coaches and we were trying to achieve this goal, and we did. And it was great. And I'll go into detail. And then they'll say, tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker. Oh, well, back when I was working on that team trying to achieve that goal, I had someone that reported to me and there was a bit of a conflict between us. And here's what happened. And I would go into the details of that. So each story can answer potentially a dozen questions, depending on how detailed you get. But the goal here is just to have like a handful of great stories. So what are 3 stories from your past that are really positive events? And what are 3 stories from your past that were like things you didn't much care for in your jobs? I think that's a good starting point. So if I were to look back and they were to say, tell me about a weakness, I'd go, well, one of my weaknesses is data. And I would tell a story about a time where my entire job was data and how it wasn't the best thing. And I would tell it in a good way. Or tell me about a time that, you worked on something that wasn't a good fit, or you disagreed with the manager. And to have those good stories are always there. So download a list of like 100 questions. Maybe only half of them are relevant, but it still doesn't hurt to practice the rest of them, as long as you use them to come up with good stories to tell. And so what I would do is I would hit record on my phone and just literally read down the list. Tell me about a conflict you had, just brain dump the story. Tell me about a project you worked on, brain dump the story, and then go back through and filter out the best ones. Does that help?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, Martin, are you available if we have follow-up questions from this discussion? Sorry, I joined in a little late.
Yeah.
Would you be, I'm just looking at your contact info here. What would be the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. That's where I'm at every day. I do a live stream every morning on LinkedIn at 8 a.m. Central. And it's on YouTube as well, but LinkedIn is the easiest way to find me. And if you have questions, I'm happy to like, send me it and I'll just do a rant on it on the morning live stream or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, for the sake of time, I think we have to start pretty soon. I joined in kind of late, so I think I'll probably save it for
cool
in a message or something like that.
That sounds perfect. Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. Connect with me after the call.
Thank you.
And that's it for me, guys. I am actually probably coming down with something this week, so if my live streams are a little spotty, that's why. But I've not been sick yet this year, so hey, it's about time it's going to happen. So we'll just hope it's not the worst.
Go COVID.
Yeah, I know, maybe. But hey, we got through today, and I'm really excited for you all. So keep on working on your stuff, and hit me up if any questions arise. Yeah, Joe. Definitely through the screen.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, Martin.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.